Hey everybody, my name is Tim. Welcome back to the channel and welcome to Vellum Fundamentals week 4. We're pretty much almost 3 months late with week 4. This was going to be a weekly series, but it's pretty clear that didn't pan out. Life happened, stuff happened, and here we are 3 months later. I promise the next one is not going to take 3 months, but here we are. So yeah, in this week's video, we're gonna make this thing that you saw in the intro, where we have this knife sort of poking through this this rubber sheath, and sort of just cutting it open. Yeah, we're gonna learn a whole bunch of stuff here, kind of revolving around cloth. So when at first I wasn't sure what I was gonna do with this episode. First, I wanted to do something like a soft body being pulled apart. We're gonna do that as well. We're just gonna look at a smaller example. I just didn't think it looked interesting enough for the for the main video. So we're also gonna be looking at how to sort of pull apart like an actual sort of piece of geometry. But so the main focus around this week is that essentially how can we sort of shatter like a cloth object so we can sort of rip it. So how can we control sort of the breaking, like the breaking strength, like how much strength should we put on something before it breaks. We're gonna learn how we can manipulate parts of that inside of the solver, because maybe we want some more control than what we can sort of set up beforehand, kind of like some other stuff we already did in the other weeks. So overall, it's not the most complicated episode, but it's gonna be interesting in sort of how you can control these things, because the way that sort of that you have stuff break is a little bit different, because the attributes for this stuff don't live where you expect them to live. So yeah, without further ado, I guess let's just dive into Houdini and let's see how this was made. All right, here we are back in Houdini. So yeah, here we have a knife animation. Just animated a knife. There we go, like that. So the knife comes from Polyhaven. If you don't know Polyhaven, I almost can't imagine that you don't know it, because I use it all the time. It's sort of free to use, pretty good quality overall. HDRized textures and models. It's amazing. It's all available for free. Like, I recommend supporting them on Patreon. They're like amazing. It's like an entire library here of just amazing models, including like plants and stuff like that. So it's kind of like Megascans, but then like actually completely free. Like Megascans, I know you can use it for free, but there's like, you need licensing for commercial stuff. But for this stuff, like, I love it. Like, I can just include this stuff in tutorials. So I used we can use this one. So this is dagger. So yeah, just got that one. So if you see here over here on the left, let's just hide it. All right, there we go. So you can see here, I just have I have this dagger, and I just loaded it in as an alembic, and then we're just animating it. So I put a camera there, so you can just kind of just see what's going on. And then in the cloth here, it's a pretty straightforward sort of process, which I'm sort of gonna talk you through. So yeah, let's just make our own sort of example before we actually look at sort of how it was implemented in here. So let's just do an empty geometry node, and let's go in there. Let's before we do the cloth one, let's actually just do something like a pig, maybe. Just to sort of proof point. Let's do another test geometry, maybe. I always use the pig. Maybe we can do, I don't know. Let's do the rubber toy. Beautiful. All right. So let's say we want to sort of pull this apart. And kind of the first step would be that we sort of need to fracture this thing. Of course, there's multiple ways to sort of go about fracturing something. There's no right or wrong way there. Like, you can fracture something all kinds of different ways. You could, for example, go like make a volume, like an ISO offset, and then scatter a couple of points, and then do something like a Voronoi fracture. So like that will be one way of sort of fracturing your geometry. So allow if I use something like an exploded view, And you can see, oh, I fractured my geometry. Or what I could do, I could, there's a material fracture, which is sort of just it's a bunch of presets to sort of fracture all kinds of different ways. You can see it's kind of slow, but it will sort of create nice looking fractures. So that's another way that you can sort of do this. Or we can do our own sort of Boolean fracture thing. Let's say we do a grid here. And let's make it a little bit smaller. Maybe a bit more like that. And yeah, something like that. Make it a bit higher. Let's just have a look at our actual thing here. Right, and let's say we just put it like that. And we can also do Boolean fracture. So it's another one where you can essentially just give it like a geometry to fracture and then something to sort of cut it with. And if you see like that, now we sort of cut it here down the middle, which is kind of cool. So maybe that's one we want. Maybe we want to do like add a little bit of more, like a little bit of geometric detail in there. So we could say that we want to get a mountain SOP. So mountain will sort of add like a little bit of noise. It's essentially, if you were to make it yourself, it's just adding some noise to positions. It's kind of like how you do it in the attribute VOP. I usually just build them myself, but now I'm lazy, so I'm just going to do it with the Boolean fracture. So then we can sort of just fracture it like this. And now let's say we want, all right, so we have this thing, and let's say we want to make this into Vellum simulation, we want to sort of pull it apart. All right, so let's say that we want, all right, let's type Vellum soft body, because we've already done that a couple of times. Soft body, let's do strut soft body, just to keep it simple. And let's plug it in. Don't plug in this one, because this is sort of like the like this thing will also create constraints, but those are meant for rigid bodies. Because of course you can fracture stuff and then throw it in a rigid body sim. We're not going to do that. We're just interested here in the geometry output over here. So we're just gonna plug these in, because I think like if I do this like this, it's I mean, it doesn't break, but it's like we don't necessarily need it like that. So we configure it as cloth here, and let's see what happens if we throw this, for example. Let's in the Vellum simulation, we need something for it to collide on. So let's do another grid, and let's move it down. I keep forgetting which key I accidentally push when I get that thing. It's one on over here somewhere, like M or... All right, no idea. I accidentally pressed it, but like I always keep forgetting which key I press when I do that. But anyway, so we're gonna do our ground plane. We're just gonna move this down. Let's do a Vellum solver. Vellum solver. And yes, all right. Let's plug in some stuff here, plug in the constraints, and let's plug in the collision geometry. And now if it's gonna fall down, and it just, it's not connected, guys. Look at it. I mean, it drops down and it's like nice and soft. Maybe we want it to be a little bit more stiff. So we could go again, go into the struts, because those are controls over the stiffness. We could make it a little bit more stiff in there. So, and now it's a little bit more stiff, but like, I mean, this works, but it's not what we want. Like you clearly see, well, it's like, it's sort of intersecting there. We have some problems with the, probably because of like the precision of the simulation, maybe the substepping, but it's, yeah, it's not attaching. Right. So we need to find a way we can sort of connect this together, like sort of glue this together. All right. So we're going to make another constraint. So we're going to tab and then type Vellum constraints. And we've done this before. We can just drag it in here. And by default, it sort of defaults to distance along edges, which we don't want. We want another one. So we're going to look at this drop-down menu. All right, which one do we need? Distance along edges. No. Bend across triangles. No. Cloth. No. Well, there's a couple here that you might think might be it. Like it might be glue or it might be weld points. And they are sort of quite similar. I can kind of maybe show you the difference. Let's see what happens if we do glue. You can kind of already see it. You can see, all right, this is sort of creating constraints here. So it's kind of creating these constraints. Let's have a look at these others, these weld points. You can see, oh, this also creates sort of something along these lines. Let's have a look at the difference between weld points here or glue. You can kind of probably already tell the difference here, but one is sort of creating sort of 2 points here, and it's kind of creating this this primitive in between. We can have a look at these constraints, and let's put a delete here. Let's see if it automatically puts it in a group. I don't think this is automatically being put into groups, so we need to make a group for it. Output group, let's call it stretch, delete non-selected. No, or give it a different name. Stretch, stretchy, stretch, right? And let's non-selected a stretchy stretch. All right. So now you can kind of see what's going on. So here, oh, I see I'm in my wrong layout. Let's reset my layout. I was still on my Solaris layout. But so let's have a look at what's happening here. So this thing here is sort of creating, it's essentially creating 2 points and then sort of constraining, like creating a constraint in between, and essentially this thing is going to keep these 2 parts together. You can see stage constraints. You can see again these things that we already know: rest length, origin, and yeah, pretty straightforward. Well, this other one, we just copy and paste. So if we do this other one and we call it glue, and let's. So if we look at this other thing, and we do just weld points. So this is just welding points essentially. This doesn't create any primitives. Like I cannot really go in here and sort of bendy bend. Like I have my bend constraints here, but like it doesn't actually create any constraints here. You can see like I don't get any constraints in here. Like I get a group here probably. It's probably gonna be point group. Primitive group. Bendy bend. No, it's not even there. So you can see we don't even get a group out of it. Essentially what this is just doing, it's saying that all right, it's kind of like a fuse. Like if we have this thing here that we're sort of fractured, and we put a fuse here in between to sort of fuse these points together. Let's increase the distance a little bit. And yeah, we need to actually delete some attributes here because this creates a connectivity attribute. Probably, yeah, it creates a name attribute. So let's delete the name attribute, and you can see without the name attribute, it still explodes. But if we put a fuse there, you can see fusing these points together again. So we fractured it and we fractured these points together again, and you can see it doesn't explode because everything is just connected. This is one piece. It's kind of the same that's sort of happening when you put it to weld points. Well, if you put it to glue, you essentially get a sort of a primitive in between, which so if you put it to glue, like I kind of always mess these up. If you put it to glue, you get like this primitive in between. It sort of keeps these connected, and with the weld points, you kind of get it welds these points similar to how a fuse would weld them. So they're actually connected, but we do get sort of parameters here that can allow us to sort of break this. So let's have a look at what the difference maybe is going to look like when we're just simulating this. So let's just throw this in our simulation. So let's go in here. Let's highlight Vellum Solver and let's play. All right, you can see it's sticking together. Pretty cool. What you can see, it's like it is sticking together, but it's not completely. Like it's here, it's sort of it's kind of like it's being held together by threads or something like that. Then we can of course make this I guess a little bit more stiff if you want. I guess the stiffness is already really high, so it's not really gonna do much of a difference. I think this will, if we increase these sub steps here, something like 5, this will already clean it up a little bit, where it's gonna be a little bit stiffer. You can see this already helps. So now you can see how it's sort of kind of like sticks together, but it's not quite it. Now let's have a look what happens if we sort of do the same thing. We do it on our welded points. All right, so we have this thing here, and let's press play. You can see it's for the most part it's just sticking together. It's not necessarily. Let me just put it to 1 sub step, else the comparison is not going to be good. All right, see 1 sub step. You can see they're actually just. They're like completely sticking together here. Like it's still like it looks a little bit weird here. But essentially this is just completely sticking together. If we put a Vellum post process after this, for example, we actually put it like that, Vellum post process. You can actually see there's an option for apply welds, and you can see this actually just completely fixes this small edge that we had there. But if we were to do it with the other way, you can see we kind of keep this issue here. Both have pros and cons. For example, these glue constraints, you would of course just use this if you want to sort of glue objects together, but maybe they're not completely part of the same object, or we're still gluing these together. So like you might have multiple spheres that are sort of attached together. You can clearly see there are 2 different spheres, but they're just bouncing on each other. And weld is what we would use if in this case we actually have just one big piece that's essentially one big piece by itself, and then we want to sort of pull it apart. All right. Hopefully this makes sense. If it doesn't, you can always ask in the comments, but I figured this would make for a sort of an easy explanation for this whole thing. All right. So let's actually use the weld and let's actually pull this thing apart. All right, so let's do some stuff here, like some stuff that we already done before, but still going to be interesting. Let's just delete, or I'll keep this in the file. So it's just so you can download. If you like, again, you can download these files from Patreon or Gumroad. All right, so let's make some groups here, and we maybe want to say that we want let's do a group. Let's do points. Let's do a region, like a sphere, something like that. All right. Let's put his bum in it. All right, there we go. And call it like, I don't know, bum group or something. Bum group. And we're gonna do another group for the front. And bounding sphere. And all right, something like that. And let's call it head group, I guess. Head and group. And let's animate these 2 groups. Let's do a transform. And let's animate our bum group. And let's animate it. Let's hide our dagger. Let's animate this to that side. And let's do another transform. And let's do the head group. And let's animate it to the other side. Beautiful. All right, so it's being pulled apart. Looks great. All right, so we're going to do another Vellum constraints. Vellum constraints. All right, there we go. Put it in here. And let's do, I always forget which one it is. I think attached to geometry. No, then it was pin to target, match animation. That's the one. All right, and we want to use the bum group and head group. Want to pin those and match them with the animation. So essentially the animation is going to be used in order to sort of pull this apart. All right, let's have a look what this is going to look like. All right, there we go. All right, not exactly what we're looking for. I think maybe we want to make these pull groups a little bit smaller anyway, because it's grabbing a little bit too many points. And also we probably want to start increasing these substeps a little bit. All right, let's make this a little bit smaller. And all right. And where we probably want to maybe increase some stiffness here and there. Let's do bend stiffness. Let's make bend stiffness a little bit higher. And all right, that's already works a lot better. Let's do, that's already quite stiff. Struts, maybe a little bit stiffer even. All right, you can see it's going a little bit crazy here. I mean, it's stretching, but it like doesn't know what to do with itself. Because like we have this, because like it's stretching way beyond what it should. Because like it just should break here, right? This is not looking good. And like we could, like if we go in there and process, like it looks really weird. There's also like there's this interior detail, of course, here. So but yeah, like it's not breaking. So what's up with the not breaking? Well, what we can do in this in this weld, you actually have an option here for breaking. There's a couple different options. You have stretch stress, bend stress, stretch distance, and stretch ratio. Let's open the help. You can sort of see a better explanation for all of these things. And let's search for breaking. All right. So, well, essentially, I don't see everything here listed, but right. So essentially, stretch stress is essentially just so how much force is being put on these constraints that we have inside of here. So we have these constraints in here. And of course, they have a certain stiffness. And let's say they're very stiff and they're being very hard, like pulled upon really hard. That of course means there's going to be a lot of stress on these. If they're more forgiving, they're going to stretch easier. It's a little bit like they're essentially, there's a little bit less stress on them, maybe because maybe they're going to give, but maybe. So essentially, we have to control it, or to say, or maybe do I want to break them by the stress that's on these? Do I want to stretch them break them by the distance? So how far can they stretch before they break? I'm not sure what the ratio does, to be honest. I was kind of hoping that this was going to be here in the... All right, here we go. The ratio between the current distance and the rest distance must exceed the threshold. So yeah, so essentially the current distance and the rest distance. So essentially the length of the constraint versus the rest length. It's sounds kind of similar to this distance from the goal location, current location. And we have the bend angle makes sense. So how much can it bend before it breaks? So they're all kind of pretty straightforward. And of course, this is just the breaking threshold that we have. Let's have a look what happens if we sort of highlight this. So breaking threshold now is pretty low, but all right, you can see it immediately breaks. That's not what we want. Let's try with 1. Immediately breaks. Let's try with 10. Just keep adding zeros until you get something that works. All right, here we can see now, all right, in the beginning, stick together, and now, bloop. All right, it's breaking. All right, so 1000 will probably be a little bit too much. We can have a look at what this is gonna do. It's gonna pull apart and then bloop. Looking pretty cool. So that's the stress. We could also say, like, if you have the distance. So let's again try this. 0.1. So essentially, how far can they move apart? So you can see already with 0.1, it already sort of already does a lot. If we say 0.01, it will still be connected in the beginning, but you can see they pull apart a little bit. They're going to break. If we do bend stress, it's going to be stress, how much it's going to be bent. And this probably, again, needs to be a little bit higher. So you can see like they all behave slightly different. This one doesn't, yeah, there we go. It needs to be a little bit lower. You can see the threshold kind of also depends on, on a couple factors. So you can see there's also so let's put it to, stress again. Let's put it maybe to 300. See if that looks good. All right, that's probably fine. But you can see there's also a scaling thing here. We can actually scale this by a certain value. You can, for example, by value, by both, or by an attribute. And so remember, this is going to be on point. So this is not, this stuff doesn't live on the constraints, because remember, this is kind of just like a fuse. They're like, these points are being fused and then giving a threshold to essentially say, all right, how much force can you have? Like how far is this face being pulled apart? So let's say this thing is stretching out, and then how much force is going to be in here. So we can put attributes on this. So let's say that we want to, let's put an attribute on here. Let's first create an attribute, and let's call this. Let's just have a look at the. Oh, we need to go a little bit higher. So this needs to happen. The attribute needs to happen before these welds are created. By the way. And so you do like this. You can, of course, also still override it later, but so let's go in here. Let's go by attribute, and you see the default is break threshold skill. Again, you can name this anything you want, but let's just go with this. So let's say the default skill is 1. So this means now nothing essentially happens. So we just have the break. We have the break threshold. And the break threshold, you can see some are set to -1. So of course those are not those can never break because they weren't fractured. And the other stuff is 300. Now if I reduce this attributes, you can essentially see that this break threshold essentially just gets reduced by this attribute here. So let's say I do another group here. Let's call it just my group or something. It doesn't really matter. Let's do points. Let's bounding regions, bounding sphere. And let's say, all right, maybe we just want, like in the center, maybe it's going to break faster, but the other parts are going to sort of stick together. All right, so we're going to do another attribute create. We're going to do it on the my group thing. My group, and we're gonna use break threshold scale, And we're gonna put this stuff in the center to 0.5, which means that if we have a look at this stuff here, that break threshold is gonna, let's actually want to my group break threshold scale 0.5. All right. So yeah, you can see some stuff here is sort of halved, and the other stuff is at 300 still. So let's have a look what this looks like. All right, so now you can see it breaking the part in the center first, and then the other stuff. And again, we can, if we maybe increase the overall break threshold scale, this should be a little bit more extreme. Even you can see it breaks apart in the center and then on the sides. Maybe we want to make this a bit smaller. So you can see you can do pretty cool stuff. Of course, you can make more parts out of this, but yeah, looks pretty cool. So yeah, now yeah, you can play around with this, like take multiple parts, do whatever. So now let's take what we learned here and let's apply this to something like a cloth. It's of course going to be very similar, but it's going to have a little bit more pieces, because if we want to do our actual example that we did, like this example, of course, like there's going to be like there's like we're going to need a lot of detail here. So I guess there's like a lot of small pieces, of course, involved. So there's going to be a lot of like a little bit more extra work. So yeah, let's move along. All right. So let's call this, I guess, toy. Right, and let's hide this thing. All right. So we have this animated knife here. Pretty basic. It's just here animated on object level because it's just easy to animate. All right, and let's have a look in our cloth. I'm just gonna walk through this and sort of go step by step. A lot of these concepts are pretty much the same. This simulation does take significantly longer because we are dealing with a lot of geometry, and we need a lot of steps. There's a couple of extra things involved, which I'm gonna be talking over. So we're just starting off here with the grid. And I am remeshing this. So I'm essentially doing this on triangles. It kind of depends. Like cloth will often, like it doesn't matter. You can do it with quads, but will also just it might in some cases look nicer with triangles. Not necessarily, but like let's imagine that yeah. So essentially, if we have, like say we have a quad here. And with a triangle, essentially it can also bend around this triangle, right? Now, if we had a quad, we need essentially, like to get sort of the same bend, we'd need to sort of double this quad. We get a lot more quads to sort of get a nice, like to get the nicer look, to get this to actually simulate properly. With this triangle, we can sort of go halfway. Let's just have a look at, like, just as an example, like we already did some cloth, but kind of just to prove the point as to why I'm using triangles there. But again, you can also just use quads. But let's do torus. Let's do cloth. So let's create a Vellum configure cloth. There we go. Vellum solver. Right, Vellum solver. That's put these doors down a little bit. Let's make it slightly bigger. And something like that. Maybe 0.75. Right. All right. And let's get a little bit more subdivisions going. I don't want it to get it too high because I kind of want to prove a point. But let's have a look. So let's simulate this. All right. So you can kind of see like, all right, post process. And let's do Right, so you can kind of see, like, it looks a little bit, it's a little bit weird. Like we get sort of these weird angles like this, as you can see here. And of course we can sort of smooth this out, and then we get a nicer result. So now it actually sort of looks a little bit better. Let's say we make this, like we just put a divide here. Essentially what a divide will just do, it will essentially just divide this quad. So you can see, essentially we get more primitives here. So it sort of just divides the primitives. Let's turn off this smoothing. Right, so you can already see this is already holding up quite a lot better, because, well, of course we got more detail here, but now these triangles sort of it's just an easier way of folding. So you can see it's already like looks a little bit better. Even if we were to just get rid of the divide, and let's sort of make this 45 by 45 or 40 by 40, probably 40 by 40, then we get roughly the same amount of faces. But even with the same amount of faces, then before we put the divide, you get these weird angles that again we don't get if we triangulate this. Again, this is not an exact science. Like, just play around with it. You can get perfectly fine sims with just quads, but a lot of times it will just look a little bit nicer with with triangles. So if you just put a remesh, also it makes it easy to sort of control the resolution of your simulation. So because there's only one place where you need to sort of increase and decrease your resolution, and that is going to be over here. You can see here, you just have one slider that allows me to sort of increase and decrease my resolution. So if we want to have a look at that on our other grid, so let's get rid of the divide and let's put a remesh over there. Let's just increase, let's decrease like that, and you can just easily just run your simulation, and you get a nice looking simulation. So that's the reason why that is there. Just adding some normals, adding an UV, of course, because we're going to render this, so we need UV. So just projecting it to the right angle, and again, so with space 5, you can see I get my UV view. You can see there's a UV there, and then I'm rotating it around because it was facing the wrong direction. So I figured I'd just do that. So I am grouping the edges here. So if you just put a group, you put it to edges, you can actually go include by edges. You can go put enable, and you can say unshared edges, and then essentially all of the edges that are not shared by another face will be grouped. So in this case, that means all of the edges on the side. Then I make a group promote to make it a point group, because I want to start pinning these, right, in my Vellum simulation. So I make a group promote, so I pin these to the sides. And then I make another group, so I sort of make a box, and I subtract from the existing group. So I can sort of extract the side there. And I can also extract the other side there. So we're just constraining the top and the bottom. So essentially, because I want to pin it on the top of the bottom. I don't really want to pin it on the sides, because we're going to slice through it and stuff like that. So I want to start fracturing this, right? Because, I mean, we're going to do this in the simulation. We don't want just a regular cloth. We want a fractured cloth. So there's a thing here called edge fracture. Let me just make another edge fracture. And again, there's a ton of different ways to fracture your geometry, like I already showed you on the toy. So if I put an edge fracture, you can see nothing. You don't see anything happening, but stuff actually happens. Let's say if I enable primitive piece and I enable this thing, you can see, all right, this creates some pieces. If I change the initial pieces, you can see I get a lot more pieces. So essentially it's fracturing based on the edges. And again, you can already see, you can also see, like, if I don't have the remesh here, you can see actually this fracturing looks better with triangles as well. You see, you get a lot sort of nicer fracture instead of sort of the stair-stepping effect that we get here. So it just looks like sort of an aliased fracture. well, this looks pretty nice. So this is essentially how you can sort of fracture, but you have some some other stuff here. You can, for example, put a point cost attribute. So what I have here is I have an attribute noise, and let's just visualize that by just putting a color and run from attribute and cost. All right, so you can see, let's see. All right, I need to increase the value. So you can see I just have a noise across this, and in this edge fracture, if I put an attribute in there, I can sort of change the cost for it to create a cluster, and that way I get sort of I get something that looks a little bit more interesting. Like it's just slightly sort of broken up. Like it's not super big. Like these are all very uniform pieces. As you can see, if I do it like this, you can see I have some of these smaller pieces and stuff like that. This is how I chose to fracture it. Again, you could use Boolean fracture, you can use Voronoi fracture, you can use all of the types of fracturing that you want. I don't know why there's a normal there. But all types of, like you can fracture this any way you want. Turn off the visualizer. And again, just putting a group, call it cloth, and then just setting up our cloth constraints. Again, you already know how to do this, so I don't have to talk you through this. I will go over some of these parameters. So of course, the stretch, stiffness, like how much can it stretch? I reduce the rest length, so there's kind of like going to be tension on this cloth. Again, you already know how all of this works. And here, same with the bend stiffness. Also, I sort of put the rest length scale a little bit lower, because of course then there's going to be tension on this cloth. Again, I will show you in a sort of in this other example that we have here, how that's sort of gonna look like. Because again, like I don't want to do too much over here, because this is just generally this was a pretty slow simulation. There's a lot of stuff going on. But let's have a look here. Let's say we do group. Let's say we do the same stuff where we go edges, and we say edges, unshared edges, like that. And then we do another group. Oh wait, we do group promote, similar than we have before. Group promote. And then we're going to promote this group. Once again, that's the same thing I was doing there. So we're going to group 6. Group 6, we're going to group them, make them points. So you can see point group now. Then we can say another group. Then we can remove stuff from the group. So I want to do it by a bounding region. Move that over. So I don't want to maybe group this side. And let's do subtract from existing. To call or subtract it from group 6, and I'm gonna do the same one for the other side. All right, like that. And then we're gonna do vellum constraints. We're gonna pin this vellum constraints, and we're gonna put this to pin to target. We're gonna group the group 6. All right, this is going to be pinned. Let's have a look. So we're just going to get this cloth now that's sort of pinned. Now you can see now it sort of droops, but if we were to sort of reduce this rest length scale, you can see, all right, there's going to be tension on this. We make it even more extreme. You can see there's going to be a lot of tension on this from the get-go. So that's kind of what's happening here with the cloth. Again, pinning it here. And then here we have these weld constraints. So essentially I'm just welding this. Just welding it all together. You can see the same thing here. I have a break threshold scale by attribute. And pretty much not a lot of going on. One thing that I am doing here is I am saying break threshold oric. So this is my own custom attribute that I'm making, which is essentially like if you remember from some other constraints that we have, where we have the rest length and the rest length oric, and then we can sort of compare between these two. Like we've done this before. which is something that I am going to be doing in my solver. But aside from that, all of the stuff here is pretty much everything that we've already done in this piece of toy, like in this toy simulation. Now let's have a look in this DOP network, because I set this up in a DOP network because I also have a pop VOP here. You can see pop force, just adding some gravity, a little bit too much gravity, and a little bit of wind. And then we have this pop VOP here. You can see with an animated parameter. And essentially, so, right, let me just run a simulation of this thing without this VOP in here. Let me go down here. Let's do 0.3, and let me just simulate a couple of frames of this. So this is the actual simulation. If we have a look in it. Oh, turn off simulation here. You can start it. So you can see this is sort of getting tension on it. You can see the knife here poking through, and then we have ripping up and ripping up. Right, let me run one without the VOP. And you can kind of, and then I'm gonna go into what we did there, because we did some custom work that's gonna make it a lot like easier to control some of this stuff. All right, so it finished caching. For the most part, it works fine, but you can see here. So this is kind of the problem I wanted to solve, and it depends on how much you care about this. But so you can see here on this one, without the solver, it sort of it slashes through, but it sort of sticks here, and then it sort of slowly cuts through. So it's not just a once sweeping motion. It sort of drags it over, and then probably same on the other side, drags it over. While with this one, where we are using the wrangle, you can see it's sort of, except for what is this one thing here, it's more of a sort of a faster, cleaner cut through. So it's very subtle. These are again these things that we can just do inside of here. So let's have a look what happens here. Again, you can do this in Vex as well. And like we've done this before when we sort of iterated in a SOP solver on some stuff. So we've used this thing before, SOP solver, where you can put something like this in, and you can make notes here. Let's run it for one frame. So we can actually, let's wait for this. So in the SOP solver, you can do SOP level operations on your geometry. All right, this seems to, it's kind of, it's a little bit of a slow sim, but we've done this before. We can actually also just do like similar how you have like wrangles in here. So attribute wrangle or an attribute VOP, like we've used those before, right? You can you can actually also do that stuff directly in DOPs here. So this is a pop VOP. So if I type pop VOP, you can essentially, you get kind of the same as a VOP in SOP context. And this allows you to do all kinds of cool stuff and make like your own custom forces and things like that. So if we dive in here, you can see we can just have a VOP here. You can see we have some outputs. You can see the outputs are a little bit different than how they would be if we just do a VOP in here. I think they're actually the same, by the way. So yeah, you're seeing the outputs are actually the same. So actually no difference whatsoever. But what I'm doing here is might look a little bit complicated. pcopen, pcfilter, comparing some stuff, and having a switch. Right. So let's have a look at what this pcopen thing is. You might already know this if you watched my tutorials. I don't remember because it's been 3 months if we actually covered something like that already in Vellum Fundamentals. I don't think so. Let me just show a demo of what that actually does. So actually it's a attribute transfer we can make ourselves, which is super useful. So let's say we want to make an attribute transfer. So let's say I just make a grid here and I make a single point. Here I have a single point. 1 point. I have a grid here. And let's say I do a, let's do a color. Just add a color. Point color, let's make this red. And then on our grid, let's make our point color black. Now, if we had attribute transfer, if we just make an attribute transfer like this, and we're gonna say, all right, we're gonna transfer an attribute from this point here to our grid. For example, the color, which it's already doing. And then here we can we can transfer this attribute on there. That's pretty basic if you know Houdini or if you've done this before. So you can transfer this attribute. Instead of doing it like that, you can also build that yourself. You can do that with a point cloud lookup. So let's do an attribute vault. I'm gonna add the grid here, and I'm gonna add the other thing. Right, we're gonna do pcopen, point cloud open. Essentially what a point cloud is, what it means is that it's gonna look around every point. So let's say we have an example, like we have this point here, and it's gonna sort of look around on another input. So let's say we have a point in space over here. It's gonna sort of look around it. Imagine if we like put a group node here, like we have a if we were to make a group node here for points, and we do something like a bounding sphere. Like we'd have, if we do the point cloud, we for example do point cloud from here. It's sort of going to look around, and then what is it going to find? Like it's going to find these points in this case. But if we're gonna do it over here, where it's going to find this point here, right? So if we look around this point here, it's going to look around, and hey, there's a point there. That's essentially what we're going to do. So we're going to say we're at second input, because there's a point. We're going to say position. Now we've created a point cloud. We can say radius here. And we want to grab something from here. And you do that with a PC filter, point cloud filter. Not find. PC. Sometimes the search just breaks. All right. PC filter. All right. Point cloud filter. So you put the handle in there. And you say, all right, what do I want to grab? I want to grab the color. And I'm going to grab the color, put it in the color. And now over here, we have the things called, for example, the radius and the max points. But again, it's only 1 point. So in this case, it doesn't matter. It's essentially how many points can I find. And you can see we've essentially done the same. So if I were to copy parameters and make the distance threshold the same, you can see this produces exactly the same result. So we can do something like that in our VOP here. All right, so we're doing that here. I'm grabbing an attribute called foo. Now I have to see where exactly I'm generating this attribute. 1 second. Oh yeah, that's happening here, of course. So yeah, what I'm doing, I need to drag back a little bit to make it sort of understandable. So here I have my knife. So I have my let's turn off my dot network. I just have my knife here imported, object merge, unpacking it, time blending it so I can create substeps, and then create an attribute called foo. Again, just call it whatever you want. Put it to out knife, and on this pop VOP, we can say so a couple of things. We can say should it run over? Should it run over geometry? Because we don't care about constraints. Because again, what I was explaining before, this weld thing lives on the points, doesn't live on the constraints. So that's kind of the difference between these types of constraints we were talking about before. So run over constraints, and the inputs. On the inputs, you can say, all right, input 1 is going to be myself, so it's going to run over this thing. Second input, what's going to be second input? I put it to my knife, to my knife here. So again, then the second input here is going to be the knife, and then of course just the other stuff is going to be my cloth itself. Right, so I'm grabbing the attribute called foo. Right, and I'm essentially saying right here, I'm just creating a parameter called foo, so it's going to be 0, and I'm going to compare these two. All right. So if essentially is this an if statement, kind of. There's a compare in VOPs is similar to an if statement. I will show you how to do this in Vex as well. after we walk through this example with VOPs. So you also know what to do with MX. So we're comparing these. So foo. So if this, if this is greater than 0, then this is going to return true. If it's not greater than 0, then it's going to be false. So again, here foo is 0, on the knife it's going to be 1. So if the knife is going to go true, it's essentially like if we were to make this red and this black, essentially once the knife sort of gets close, it's going to put this color on here, except in this case it's not going to be the color. We're going to do something else with it. So this is where this break threshold origin that we created comes in. So I'm binding this in. I make a bind, which means I'm loading it in, and I'm gonna put this compare. So if this is true, I'm going to put this in a switch, and this Boolean operation, think of this as an on-off switch. So it's gonna switch from on to off. So if it's true, it's going to put take the second input. If it's not true, it's gonna take the first input. So the break threshold origin is the break threshold of this thing from the start. So that's going to be 440. That's going to be the break threshold. Now, if the knife gets really close, because we are doing a point cloud around it, it's going to be greater than 0, because the knife is set to 1. So it's going to switch. It's going to use this one, and this is being multiplied by a value, and then it's going to be written out into break threshold. So you can see here, I'm having a little bit of an override thing. If you still don't understand what is happening here, let me just reduce my maybe my sub steps, and again, sort of let's also do this with color. Let's say I just put some color on my knife, make it red. And let's put some, just to do a similar example we had before. And let's make it black here. 0, 0, 0. And let's just do, if we do pcfilter, let's make it, let's grab the color channel as well. And let's just put that in color, and let's turn substeps down a little bit. So this is going to run a little bit faster, and then you can kind of see what's going to go on. Right. Let's start this a couple frames later, because the knife is not going to move until a little bit into it. So you can see this is black. Knife is gonna get closer. There it's gonna go, it's gonna go, it's gonna get closer, 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 closer. All right, and now you can see we get a little point of red on this thing. And what happens when we get this little point of red? Our break threshold is gonna go down. Let's just scroll down until we find some. Okay, scroll up a little bit. There should be. Oh, wait, this is filter by red is 1. That's probably going to be easier. All right. Right. So in this case, this doesn't really do anything because apparently there's no rip exactly on this spot yet. But essentially, what the idea is that if this goes over a certain radius, then oh wait, it's because this is still set to 1 because I had the multiplier. Essentially, what this means is that if this goes over a certain value, I'm just going to remove the colors again, then what is going to happen is that this switch is going to go off. It's sort of so if the knife is really close to something, then the knife is going to reduce the break threshold. So it's going to take the original break threshold, multiply it by this value here. And again, this value here is being keyed down to 0.1. It's going to be written out. So then the stuff around the knife is much easier to break. And then because the stuff around the knife is easier to break, that means that if we are in a situation like this, right, here you go, it's going to be 44 instead of 440. You can see the original and the multiplied one. So that means the stuff over here is going to be easier to break, because it's only going to happen essentially on that sort of edge of the for some reason the Q part really is messing up. So that's how we can create these controls to sort of, in this case, right, we wanted to make sure that it sort of really quickly slashes through instead of sort of sticking to it like we have here. Like this might also be what you want. It kind of depends. But you can imagine if you have a scenario where you need finer control like this, then you have the option to do something like this. So yeah, that's pretty much it. Right, so actually re-recording a part here. I said I was gonna sort of also show how to do this in Vex, and I forgot. So I'm gonna do this now. So I'm gonna just go to put two views. We can kind of sort of compare what we're gonna be doing. Right, let's do pulp wrangle. So you can do pulp wrangle here, and essentially this is it's similar to sort of a wrangle in SOPs. But now we're doing it sort of on our DOP geometry. Again, we need to set this up the same way. So myself and SOP, and we're just gonna point it to this thing. All right. And we can go in here and you can sort of start replicating what's gonna happen here. So we can just start, and this needs to run on geometry, by the way, so that's fine. All right, let's just type pcopen and then just F1 on it so we can have a look at it, sort of how to set this up. All right, so integer pcopen. So essentially what we need to do is we need to call an integer. So that's integer pc. I'm gonna say, all right, it's gonna be equal to pcopen, file name. All right, what do we want to do our point cloud on? Well, we want to do it on the second input, right? So input 1. And we want to use the position channel. It should be a string, so p. So again, as you can see here, p channel. All right, then we're gonna say, right, input, so also p as a vector, radius and the max points. So we had I think what do we have as a radius here? We had 0.1, 0.1, and number of points 20. Right, so just close this, semicolon, and then there we go. So this is our point cloud, pretty simple. Now we can start searching into our point cloud, and it's called pcfilter. So if we again just open this up. All right, pcfilter. So we can extract something, and so let's type float foo, because that's what we call it, equals. I'm going to say pcfilter. We're going to say, right, the handle is going to be pc. So because we already created it, right? This is the handle integer. This is the handle. And what do we want to extract? Foo, because that's the attribute. Close. There we go. Oh, and we should actually write this out correctly. Right, so now we have done this part. So this is the pcopen and pcfilter. Right, now we need to do some comparison. So we need to call a new attribute because we're going to do some comparing. We don't even need to compare it. We can just say, right, let's do an if statement. So if. So compare that you see over there is similar to an if statement. So let's do an if statement. If foo is greater than 0, we're going to open and close. So that is going to be similar to what we see here, because this is set to 0, and we're comparing foo to that. So if this is greater than 0, then we're going to say that break threshold equals break threshold ORIC times 0.1. And there we go. And this is exactly the same as is visible here, except for this thing. So exactly the same. This is how I would normally do it. I figured I'd just build it in VOPs first, because I know a lot of people find that a little bit easier. But they do exactly the same thing. So that's why I'm just keeping it, just putting it in here like this. But general, you can see this is a lot more sort of straightforward to see what's going on. It's faster to type, but they do exactly the same. So it doesn't necessarily matter what you like. If you prefer VOPs, do VOPs. If you prefer VEX, do VEX. Now you know how to do it. So yeah, that's pretty much it. So yeah, we covered how to sort of fracture an object, sort of weld it together, and then learn how we can sort of break it inside Vellum. Do it on both soft objects, soft body objects. Do it on cloth. Different types of constraints. How do you have the control to sort of fine tune these types of things, like we did with the knife, with the point cloud around it. So overall, I think pretty interesting. Hopefully you agree. If you have questions, of course, let me know. And I would love to hear what you want to see next. I kind of have the idea that I want to sort of start covering some grain stuff with Vellum soon. I have some interesting ideas on what we cover with that. But also let me know if you want to see more with soft bodies and with cloth. There's still a lot of stuff that we need to do. I got some other suggestions on like previous videos of interesting stuff to cover. I think someone asked something with like wires, like twisting wires. That might also be interesting. But okay, like again, if you have suggestions, stuff that you want to see in the future videos, which didn't turn out quite as weekly as I'd hoped, but weekly-ish, monthly-ish, whatever. They're going to be there at some point, and they're hopefully going to be interesting. But yeah, again, you can download the file that I just shown you on Patreon or on Gumroad. Hopefully I'll see you in the next one. Peace.